in critical situations, finding a edge to win games is something that we came up short with. I think as a front office, we got to continue to add talent to this roster. We have to make sure that the players we bring into this building also fit the culture that we want, so we can continue to make strides forward. So I'm disappointed, just like our fans are, but I'm not discouraged. I believe we have a strong core of players that we're going to connect to the right staff as they come in, to make the progress that's needed. I'm grateful for George and Kevin and their trust in me to continue to get this thing back on track and get it corrected. Uh, I do want to address some of the things that I've heard about the relationship between Kevin and I that couldn't be further from the truth. We spend almost every single day together talking about solutions and direction of where we want to be and where we're going to go. Um, I mean, it is so far from the truth. It was a little disappointing to hear that, to be honest. But we do have the strong core that we're going to get with the right staff. I think it's really important to allow Ian to go through his own interview process if that pops up. If it doesn't, he will be in that group as well as we move forward. And then our senior leadership here with the Bears is also everyone's gone through the league training in terms of inclusivity and sound hiring practices that the league puts in place. And as we move forward in our process, they will have time to spend with our candidates, especially as we get down to the finalist group. I'll open up to questions.
And when you talk about looking in the mirror
Yeah.
and re-examining past processes, what were some of the errors you made in hiring Matt Eberflus, Luke Getsy, Shane Waldron, and how will that inform you to get this right?
Yeah, I think it's a couple of things that I mentioned is just casting a wide net. I think it's adding more data to the equation. It's digging deeper with our research. Um, all of those things are really important. I think also knowing the team and where it is right now, knowing it better than I ever have before, that's important. I think as you go along, you gain wisdom every single year and every experience that you go through, and that helps you make better decisions as you go.
Ryan, given the historic nature of this year's failure, what specifically are you willing?
What was it?
Given the historic nature of this year's failure, what specifically are you willing to take ownership of that contributed to the unraveling?
We lost games, and at the end of the day, the wins and losses and the record, that's on me. I'm in charge of the football operation. I've been entrusted to get this organization to a championship caliber, and we came up short with that, and I have to take responsibility for that.
Your plan for Caleb was very specific and very elaborate. His entire rookie season was subjected to disruption and stress. What
Can you explain the disruption, stress part?
offense coordinator got fired, his head coach got fired. A lot of turmoil throughout the course of his rookie season. What went wrong with your plan?
Obviously, there's some things when there's a staff in place. When we went through the interview cycle with Shane, I think there's some compatibility things. I think there's some challenges with pairing, and I answered this before, a rookie quarterback that has a lot of growth. He had 37 starts, in college. You'd like to, have in that 35 to 40 range, and there's a lot of growth there, and there's some compatibility to make sure that it's being taught the right way. And I think there's some hiccups there. And again, that's part of the ownership piece that I got to take.
Ryan, how will you?
As the organization set up this coaching search and is trying to make it as attractive as his job as possible, were you given a contract extension?
I've said from the day I've been hired, I'm not going to get in my contract. That I just think it's a very personal thing in terms of how much I'm making and how long I'm making it.
Do you understand why if any?
Yeah, so the candidates that we talk to, that'll be something that I can address with them.
What seems to be maybe an overriding, or at least a theme in the locker room, that the players need more discipline, need to be challenged more. Is that true? Is that the type of coach that this locker room needs, based on you learning more about your players?
Yeah, I think that's important for any locker room. I had made a comment a couple of weeks ago about training camp. I think one important thing is we look at the wins and losses, but you got to go to the root cause on how we got there. And I do think we need to challenge our guys more. And when we talk about accountability, there's systems of accountability. It's how we're going to put tape up of this is not how we do it. And then with examples of this is how we do it. And sometimes that can be uncomfortable. I call that healthy friction. I definitely think we need more of that, and that would help result in closing the gap on some of these games that we came short.
Ryan, when these
What could the numbers get to?
I haven't put a limit on it. I think the restriction at some point is how much time you have. There's a lot of rules that go along with kind of setting your calendar up. So we want to make sure that it fits that and it's not stressing us out to an extent where we're not doing quality work. It absolutely needs to be quality, but I haven't put a number on it.
Ryan, what assurances will you give candidates about the power structure inside Halas Hall, about who they work for, clarity there? There seems to be some questions.
Yeah, no, so I'll end up selecting the coach. I'm taking the lead on that, and George and Kevin have put me in charge of that. And that'll be the relationship between the coach and I.
When you told Adam, you know that coaches are going to ask about your status and about being aligned with you. What will you tell them?
Yeah, I'll have that conversation with them. We'll go from there.
Ryan, when it comes to
when you talk about coaches and having a wide enough pool where there might be some coaches that surprise you, are all options on the table? Would you consider giving up draft capital to trade for a coach of a currently employed by another team?
Yeah, we'll look at all avenues to get the best coach here.
Ryan, over the summer, you guys talked about the culture here, the leadership here a lot, about what you had. How did it get from that to where we're talking about details and lack of accountability? What do you think kind of fractured that?
Yeah, there's a couple things there. When we talk about culture, and I've talked about this, I strongly believe culture is people. You all spend time with them. There's a really good locker room, and they're with really good guys. I think there's some foundational things that you have to address from the beginning to kind of hold the standard throughout the entire year. I believe when you go through struggle, some of those things get difficult, right? Guys are struggling with just being down and losing games. And I think that's some of the things that we saw. Any team needs like a certain standard and certain measurements of how we're going to do things. Because at some point in the season, you're going to have adversity and your house is going to be shaken and your foundation's tested. And at that point, you got to go look at the root cause. Did we do everything we were supposed to in terms of detailing everything we needed to? Because if you didn't, it's a little bit off. And like I said, I think we looked at the outcome and winning more than the process in doing those things. Then those things show up and bubble up. Especially, we were put in a lot of situations where, we're a couple yards away from a kick line. We were right there in a lot of situations. And I think some of the competitive poise popped up in terms of doing what we need to do and being disciplined to get over the hump.
Right, in terms
There was
of-
a lot of discussion, and I'm sure you guys will have this discussion too, about pairing an offensive guy with a young quarterback versus, you know, a guy that can kind of oversee the whole thing and has head coaching experience, things like that. Just what is your general philosophy when it comes to that kind of tug of war between those two head coaching candidates?
Yeah, I think there's like, for a young quarterback, obviously there's ideal fit, but at the end of the day, you got to look at all the characteristics of what you're looking for in a head coach. And then you got to see what's the
At University of Phoenix, we offer an unlimited number of scholarships, so everyone who qualifies for one gets one.
In October, and then the Hail Mary happened. Why did that set off such a downward spiral for the team in your mind?
Yeah, that's a tough way to lose. I think a lot of questioning happens just in terms of how did we get there. It's emotional in terms of the drain that comes from a loss like that. And that's where we got to be better just in terms of resilience of bouncing back and get back to things. So it was disappointing to kind of see things go south after that deal. And there's a lot of learning lessons from that game for our guys to make sure we don't put ourselves in that position.
What was the most frustrating element for you of the offensive line play throughout the season? And then can you touch on Montez Sweat's season? You get the big impact last year, had some different injuries this year, but didn't seem to be the multiplier, which I think was the word you guys used a year ago.
Yeah. So line wise, the frustrating piece of that is I think it was hard to really identify. I'll say it this way: there wasn't one reason. It wasn't always the offensive line. It wasn't always the quarterback. It wasn't always the running back and protection. There's a lot of factors in there to look into, and I think all were involved, and it's a place we need to improve as we move forward. Because obviously, you don't want your quarterback hit that much, and some of those things do fall on Caleb. I think he's mentioned that to you guys in terms of getting us in a position to pick things up and also getting the ball out on time, and that's part of being a young quarterback. Is you're trying to figure out the coverages and you're seeing a lot of different things. But you're also trying to be right, and that leads to some of those sacks. So I think, again, there's a lot of learning to be done in that situation.
Ryan, what about Sweat?
Yep. I'll answer. For Montez, we had a good conversation. I know he's disappointed in himself and wants to continue to get better. I know, and he knows he's capable of much more. Also, as we continue to build the defensive line, adding more talent on that will help. When we looked at some of the chip numbers and the double teams, he did get a fair share of those too. And the way that you defeat that is continue to add talent to create more one-on-one matchups.
Right. You mentioned this leadership group. Can you expand on who else that is and why it's important that they're involved in your search here?
Yeah, so that goes into our SVP group on the business side. I think it's really important. Kevin and I talk about all the time, just the continuity between football and business. That's one thing we take a lot of pride on here. So it's important when we get to the right phase that they're involved as well and become familiar with our staff. And I think that's important because it's a part of the family that's here, and they support football, and football supports business, and it's a beautiful relationship, and that's something we take seriously.
After 3 seasons in this job, what do you point to as your most significant accomplishments here?
So the things that we've done on the roster, I think from a quarterback position, I think he hasn't even hit close to his ceiling and hit a lot of milestones that haven't been hit here in a very long time. Just at this past draft, I think Rome Odunze is going to be one of the best receivers to come through here. He's a very talented, humble, and I think his leadership is going to grow. I mentioned Darnell Wright. I think from another top 10 pick, I think that's a guy that continues to get better every single year. The secondary, obviously, also being aware of the guys that were here. that have done a nice job and extended and make sure that they are here. So I think there's just a lot of things on the roster that we continue to chip away. I think sometimes I'm hard on myself, and even looking at the situation for what we walked into and how much in the red we were to where we are today. I think as a front office, we can take a lot of pride in that. Are we going to hit on everything? No. Have we missed some things? Absolutely. I do take pride in the fact that we are learning from those misses and we continue to improve. So I think from a roster standpoint, we continue to get better. Where I want to get better is supporting the coaching staff to make sure that we have all the systems in place to make sure that things like happened this year in terms of the accountability, things like that, I want to make sure without micromanaging or getting into things, like just awareness to make sure I'm pushing forward and being a good partner to say, hey, let's make sure we hit these things so that they don't manifest later.
On that topic of accountability, you alluded in the pregame show a couple weeks ago that you traced some of this back to issues that popped up during training camp. What specifically are you referring to with that, and why didn't that get addressed back in the summer?
Yeah, I think I mentioned it before, but we were just talking about discipline. Like we had some mistakes in pre-snap penalties, and we had a couple, they call them dojos, like don't jump situations in 2-minute drills that some of them showed up in practice, and it was addressed. But could we have done more? Could we have pushed more to make sure that they don't show up on game day?
Ryan, are you guys using outside consultants in the coaching search in any way? Background, any of that? Okay.
Background, yes.
To do some background work, stuff like that. Speaking of background work, why is the list so long? You guys have had a month and a half to interview coaches over the last month and a half, but you've been able to do a lot of research, and you could have narrowed that.
There's some intriguing candidates that we want to talk to.
Ryan, you put a lot of
the locker room needing more leadership.
Say that one more time.
The locker room itself needing more leadership. Like the players are asking for a coach, but I'm wondering if you're looking at the locker room right now thinking, I need somebody to come in there and.
Yeah, well, we definitely will take that into consideration as we add more talent to the roster. I've also challenged in some of our exit meetings some of our guys to take the next step to lead as well. I was in the same category, and some of our guys were too, in terms of I saw this and I just was, should I say something about this? Should I step up? And I encourage all those guys. We got to get to this place. We've been together long enough. There's continuity. We aren't going to take things personal anymore amongst each other, both in the front office and in football operations, but also in the locker room and in coaching. Like, we got to be able to have healthy friction, like I talked about, to say, hey, that's not the way we're supposed to do it. Let's clean it up and get better. Because again, that will show up later in the season.
Ryan, what's the
You stood by Matt Eberflus, believing in his leadership ability. As you go through this next search, how do you properly identify what a leader looks like to run this football operations here for you?
Yeah, just more sensitive on the follow through and the actions that come with. We all talk about a lot of things, and there was some follow through. I think to say like it wasn't all there, that he didn't do what he was supposed to do, would be false. I think it can be done stronger and more consistently, again, to make sure some of the little things don't pop up later.
Historically, this franchise hires assistant coaches and makes them head coaches. I think only one in the last 100 years has been a head coach before. What is the value you put on experience at the head coaching level versus how you project an assistant to be, given that Matt Eberflus was an assistant and maybe some of the traits you thought would translate did not?
Yeah, it's a great question. When you look at that, good coaches come from different places, different backgrounds. How are you supplementing your blind spots, your void? So if you're a first-time head coach, what can we put in place for you to help support you? What do the coordinators look like? Are they former head coaches? You have an advisor that's a head coach that's at your right side to pick up some of the blind spots to say, hey, you might want to take care of this. This could turn into something later, or I think you might be missing here. So how are you supporting some of those blind spots if you are a first-time coach? If you have been a head coach before, yeah, there's a lot of value because some of the new things, like you've already experienced those, you've been around it, and you have kind of the playbook and the blueprint on how to counter things when they go away from you, or when you have success, how do you make sure that everyone stays humble and they continue to work and get better?
There's a lot of weapons around.
Which coaches have you scheduled interviews with already?
So what we will do, and I forgot to mention this, when we interview candidates and they approve it,
You know the best way to grow on YouTube is by posting consistent, good content. Here's how I accomplish that easily with Spotter Studios.
Have enough resources to flip the outline in this offseason.
Yeah, so I would say, like, bubble philosophically, you would obviously do that. I also think you got to look at the situations in terms of, when you go through the draft as a trade deal, it's what's best available. Also, when you go through free agency, we're looking at a board of what's there. So just because it's the philosophy doesn't mean that every year there's answers at those positions for you to take. But obviously I believe in that, and I definitely think we have all the assets we need. And from a draft free agent, I think some things line up for us to take care of those deals.
Thank you.